Good, hello, and welcome to Over the Edge. Tonight, we bring you another UFO, and it's going to be the 50s UFO program. Most everything in this mix was recorded during the 1950s. Another UFO on Over the Edge.
In 1947, a pilot spotted 9 saucer-like shapes moving at an estimated speed of 1,200 miles per hour, and his story caught the imagination of the nation. By 1950, sightings of similar unidentified flying objects were being reported by citizens all over the country, and an average of 600 per year were reported during the decade. The United States Air Force spent approximately $60,000 a year attempting to determine whether or not there was any truth to the sightings. By the end of the decade, there was no conclusive answer.
Another UFO!
Newscaster in every newspaper across the nation has made headlines out of it, and this afternoon we are honored indeed to have here in our studio this man, Kenneth Arnold, who we believe may be able to give us a first-hand account and give you the same on what happened. Kenneth, first of all, if you'll move up here to the microphone just a little closer, we'll ask you to just tell in your own fashion, as you told us last night in your hotel room and again this morning, what you were doing there and how this entire thing started. Go ahead, Kenneth. Microphone just a little closer.
Well, at about
we'll ask you
2:15, I took off from Chehalis, Washington,
and
en route to Yakima. Of course, every time that any of us fly over the country near Mount Rainier, we spend an hour or two in search of the Marine plane that's never been found that they believe is in the snow someplace southwest of that particular area. That area is located at about, its elevation is about 10,000 foot. And I had made one sweep in close to Mount Rainier and down one of the canyons and was dragging it for any types of objects that might prove to be the Marine ship. And as I come out of the canyon there, it was about 15 minutes. I was approximately 25 to 28 miles from Mount Rainier. I climbed back up to 9,200 feet, and I noticed to the left of me a chain which looked to me like the tail of a Chinese kite, kind of weaving and going at a terrific speed across the face of Mount Rainier. I at first thought they were geese because it flew like geese, but it was going so fast that I immediately changed my mind and decided it was a bunch of new jet planes in formation. Well, as the planes come to the edge of Mount Rainier, flying at about 160 degrees south, I thought I would clock them because it was such a clear day, and I didn't know where their destination was, but due to the fact that I had Mount St. Helens and Mount Adams to clock them by, I just thought I'd see just how fast they were going, since among pilots we argue about speed so much. And they seemed to flip and flash in the sun just like a mirror. And in fact, I happened to be at an angle from the sun that seemed to hit the tops of these peculiar-looking things in such a way that it almost blinded you when you looked at them through your plexiglass windshield. Well, it was about 1 minute to 3 when I started clocking them on my sweep second-hand clock, and as I kept looking at them, I kept looking for their tails. They didn't have any tails. I thought, well, maybe something's wrong with my eyes. And I turned the plane around and opened the window and looked out the window, and sure enough, I couldn't find any tails on them. And the whole observation of these particular ships didn't last more than about 2.5 minutes, and I could see them only plainly when they seemed to tip their wing or whatever it was, and the sun flashed on them. They looked something like a pie plate that was cut in half with a sort of a convex triangle in the rear. Now, I thought, well, that maybe they're jet planes with just the tails painted green or brown or something, and didn't think too much of it, but kept on watching them. They didn't fly in the conventional formation that's taught in our Army. They seemed to kind of weave in and out right above the mountaintops. And I would say that they even went down into the canyons in several instances, probably 100 feet. But I could see them against the snow, of course, on Mount Rainier, and against the snow on Mount Adams as they were flashing, and against a high ridge that happens to lay in between Mount Rainier and Mount Adams. But when I observed the tail end of the last one passing Mount Adams and I was at an angle near Mount Rainier from it. But I looked at my watch, and it showed 1 minute and 42 seconds. Well, I still thought, well, that's pretty fast, and I didn't stop to think what the distance was between the two mountains. Well, I landed at Yakima, Washington, and Al Baxter was there to greet me and saw up here. And he told me, I guess I better change my brand. But he kind of gave me a mysterious sort of a look that maybe I had seen something he didn't know. And, well, I just kind of forgot it then till I got down at Pendleton, and I began looking at my map and taking measurements on it. And the best calculation I could figure out, now even in spite of error, would be around 1,200 miles an hour, because making the distance from Mount Rainier to Mount Adams in, we'll say, approximately 2 minutes, it's almost, it'd be around 25 miles per minute. Now, allowing for error, we can give them 3 minutes or 4 minutes to make it, and they're still going more than 800 miles an hour, and to my knowledge, there isn't anything that I read about outside of some of the German rockets that would go that fast. These were flying in more or less a level, constant altitude. They weren't going up and they weren't going down. They were just simply flying straight and level, and I laughed and I told the pilots at Pendleton, I said, they sure must have had a tailwind. But it didn't seem to help me much. But to the best of my knowledge and the best of my description, that is what I actually saw, and like I told the Associated Press, I'd be glad to confirm it with my hands on a Bible, because I did see it. And whether it has anything to do with our Army or our intelligence, or whether it has to do with some foreign country, I don't know. But I did see it, and I did clock it, and I just happened to be in a beautiful position to do it, and it's just as much a mystery to me as it is to everyone else who's been calling me the last 24 hours wondering what it was.
Well, Kenneth, thank you very much. I know that you've certainly been busy these last 24 hours, because I've spent some of the time with you myself, and I know that the press associations, both Associated Press and our press, the United Press, has been right after you every minute. The Associated and United Press all over the nation has been after this story. It's been on every newscast over the air and in every newspaper I know of. The United Press in Portland has made several telephone calls here to Pendleton to me and to you this morning. And from New York, I understand they're after this story. And we may have an answer for it before night, because if it is some new type of Army or Navy secret missile, there will probably a story come out on it from the Army or Navy saying that it is a new secret plane, and that will be all there is to it, and they will hush up the story, or perhaps that we will finally get a definite answer to it. I understand the United Press is checking on it out at New York now with the Army and also with the Navy, and we hope to have some concrete answer before nightfall. We certainly want to thank you, Kenneth, for coming into our studio. We feel very pleased that this news, which is making nationwide news across the country, we are able to give our listeners over KWRC a first-hand report direct from you of what you saw. And we urge our listeners to keep tuned to this station, because any time this afternoon or this evening that we get something on it on our United Press teletype, which is in direct communications with New York, Chicago, Portland, in fact, every United Press bureau across the nation, we'll have it on the air.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection. Russia has demanded UN action to get all foreign military personnel out of Greece. Southern soft coal operators have not yet reached agreement with John L. Lewis, but the rest of the soft coal industry has resumed production. The House of Representatives has passed the tax reduction bill by more than the two-thirds which would be required to override a veto. Headline edition will bring you special reports and interviews in a moment.
The American Broadcasting Company and affiliated stations present Headline Edition with Taylor Grant. From all over the world, wherever the day's headlines are made, Headline Edition brings you accurate, timely reports on the news behind those headlines, plus informative in-person interviews with the men and women who made the headlines today. Today's edition presents a roundup of the latest developments in the finding of a flying disc, an eyewitness report of today's significant action in the UN Security Council. Ohio Congressman Thomas A. Jenkins commenting on today's House action on tax legislation, a special report on the status of soft coal negotiations, and the details of today's All-Star baseball game reported from Chicago. Stay in step with history in the making. Stay tuned to Headline Edition. Now, here's Taylor Grant.
Late this afternoon, a bulletin from New Mexico suggested that the widely publicized mystery of the flying saucers may soon be solved. Army Air Force officers reported that one of the strange discs had been found and inspected sometime last week. Our correspondents in Los Angeles and Chicago have been in contact with Army officials endeavoring to obtain all possible late information. Joe Wilson reports to us now from Chicago.
The Army may be getting to the bottom of all this talk about the so-called flying saucers. As a matter of fact, the 509th Atomic Bomb Group headquarters at Roswell, New Mexico, reports that it has received one of the discs which landed on a ranch outside Roswell. The disc landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico, and the rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brizell was the man who discovered the saucer. Colonel William Blanchard of the Roswell Air Base refuses to give details of what the flying disc looks like. In Fort Worth, Texas, where the object was first sent, Brigadier General Roger Ramey says that it is being shipped by air to the AAF Research Center at Wright Field, Ohio. A few moments ago, I talked to officials at Wright Field, and they declared that they expect the so-called flying saucer to be delivered there, but that it hasn't arrived as yet. In the meantime, General Ramey describes the object as being of flimsy construction, almost like a box type. He says that it was so battered that he was unable to determine whether it had a disc form, and he does not indicate its size. Ramey says that so far as can be determined, no one saw the object in the air, and he describes it as being made of some sort of tinfoil. Other Army officials say that further information indicates that the object had a diameter of about 20 to 25 feet, and that nothing in the apparent construction indicated any capacity for speed, and that there was no evidence of a power plant. The disc also appeared too flimsy to carry a man. Now, back to Taylor Grant in New York.
There was important activity within the UN Security Council today.
We interrupt this concert by the Philharmonic Orchestra to bring you a special news bulletin.
See you later, alligator.
Likewise. Come in, Edward R. Sparrow. This is Edward R. Sparrow. I am about to bring you, for the first time, actual person-to-person communication with another planet. Yes, we have finally established radio contact with Mars and the Martian people. Come in, Mars. Can you hear me, Mars?
I hear you knocking. Why don't you write me, darling? Send me a letter.
You don't understand, Mars. I want to talk.
Not as sensationalists. For the past 3 years, a large number of perfectly sane and reliable people have been involved in this flying saucer business. Even those of us who have never seen one have become involved. We read about them, talk about them, wonder about these reports of strange phenomena in the skies. So almost from the start, CBS has been following the story. We have been collecting material on flying saucer observations for many months, checking, cross-checking, trying to track down leads, no matter how far afield they took us. This, tonight, is our report. We frankly admit that we don't know whether flying saucers actually exist. We've never seen one. We are going to bring you the facts at hand. What they add up to, well, that's for you to decide. That's up to you. It all began just a little less than 3 full years ago. It began in the sky over western Washington, up there in the hip pocket of the country. Early one June morning in 1947, a C-46 Marine transport with 32 Marines aboard crashed in the vicinity of Mount Rainier. An air search was immediately organized to locate the downed plane. Among the many service and private flyers who participated in this search was Mr. Kenneth Arnold, a businessman of Boise, Idaho, a veteran pilot in forest fire control work, a man with 6 years' experience flying over the rugged terrain in and around Mount Rainier. Yesterday morning, we spoke to Mr. Arnold over the phone. We asked him to repeat for us, in his own words, what he saw in the sky over Mount Rainier on June 24th, 1947. We recorded what he said, and we're going to play it for you now. The slight beep that you will hear intermittently is required by law to let both parties of a phone conversation know they are being recorded. Here now is Mr. Kenneth Arnold.
It was while I was searching for this crash that I noticed a terrific blue flash pass nose of my airplane, I noticed that the flash came from a chain of very peculiar-looking objects that were rapidly approaching Mount Rainier at about 107 degrees. This chain of objects were 9 in number. I assumed at the time they were a new formation or a new type of jet, though I was baffled by the fact that they did not have any tails. It passed almost directly in front of me, but at a distance of about 23 miles, which is not very great in the air. I judged their wingspan to be at least 100 feet across. The sighting did not particularly disturb me at the time, except that I had never seen planes of that type.
Mr. Arnold, after landing, made a routine report of what he had seen to a Civil Aeronautics Administration representative, promptly forgot the matter, until the wheels of publicity began to turn. The floodgates opened.
I never could understand at that time why the world got so upset about this, as these things didn't seem to be a menace. I believe they had something to do with our Army and Air Force.
On 3 different occasions, Mr. Arnold was questioned by military intelligence. They expressed doubt as to the accuracy of some of his reported observations.
That's right. Now, of course, some of the reports they did take from newspapers which did not quote me properly. Now, when I told the press, they misquoted me, and in the excitement of it all, one newspaper and another one got it so snarled up that nobody knew just exactly what they were talking about, I guess.
Here's how the name Flying Saucer was born.
These objects more or less fluttered like they were, I'd say boats on very rough water or a very rough air of some type. And when I described how they flew, I said that they flew like you take a saucer and throw it across the water. Most of the newspapers misunderstood and misquoted that, too. They said that I said that they were saucer-like. I said they flew in a saucer-like fashion.
That was an historic misquote. While Mr. Arnold's original explanation has been forgotten, the term flying saucer has become a household word. Few people realize that Mr. Arnold has reported seeing these same strange objects in the sky on 3 other occasions. He says that some pilots in the Northwest have reported seeing them on 8 separate occasions. We asked for his own personal opinion on the nature of what he and the others had seen.
I don't know how best to explain that. I more or less have reserved an opinion as to what I think. Naturally, being a natural-born American, if it's not made by our science or our Army Air Forces, I'm inclined to believe that it's of an extraterrestrial origin.
Extraterrestrial origin? You mean you think there's a possibility they may be coming out of space from other planets? I suppose that's pretty hard for people to take seriously.
Well, I'll tell you this much. All the airline pilots, none of us have appreciated being laughed at. We made our report essentially to begin with because we thought that if our government didn't know what it was only our duty to report it to our nation and to our Air Force out of it. I think it's something that is of concern to every person in the country. And I don't think it's anything for people to get hysterical about. Now, that's just my frank opinion of it.
So that's how it all began. That was the trigger action. Kenneth Arnold's story went scudding over the news wires. Radio and newspapers picked it up. And then within days, the country broke out into a flood of flying saucer observations. Many of these reports, a great many of them, obviously could be discounted. Others, reports from perfectly competent, sober, and reliable observers, found no easy answer. In the face of this, late in 1947, the Chief of Staff of the Air Forces, at that time General Carl Toohey Spotts, sent a directive to the Air Materiel Command, located at Wright Field, Ohio.
The Air Materiel Command is directed to set up a project whose purpose is to collect, collate, evaluate, and distribute to interested government agencies and contractors all pertinent information concerning sightings of phenomena in the atmosphere, which can be construed to be of concern to the national security.
So was born Project Saucer. Immediately, the Air Materiel Command went to work. A team of experts was called in. Astronomers, meteorologists, physicists, psychologists, electronic engineers. Anyone who might have any special knowledge that could shed some light on this mystery. These specialists, along with a corps of trained investigators, tracked down every report of a flying saucer they could find. Each person making the report was questioned in detail. The findings were carefully screened by the entire project personnel. And finally, each and every report was evaluated in a detailed study, 2 volumes thick, entitled
Report on Unidentified Aerial and Celestial Objects.
For 2 years, this report was marked secret. But on December 30th, 1949, it was declassified. And tonight, for the first time on the air, we will bring you actual portions of this report, evaluations, summaries, and conclusions. Here, for instance, is a typical case.
8 July 1947, 0930 hours local, Muroc Air Force Base. 4 witnesses all observed 2 silver disc-like spherical objects against a clear, bright sky. All witnesses estimated the altitude at about 8,000 feet, the speed between 300 and 400 miles per hour.
Remember, these were trained observers, Air Force men.
The objects reportedly traveled in a straight line. Taking the mean reported speed, 350 miles per hour, and the time in sight, 1/2 hour, the objects must then have traveled 175 miles while in sight. If the objects were of such proportions as to be seen at that distance, it is believed that more details could have been observed at the first sighting.
The Air Materiel Command opinion on the Muroc Air Base sightings was this.
This report is a result of misinterpretation of the nature of real stimuli, probably research balloons.
Another report on January 7th, 1948. Tech Sergeant Quinton A. Blackwell, chief operator of the control tower at Godman Field, an Air Force base at Fort Knox, Kentucky, spotted a strange object hovering over the south portion of the field. In a matter of minutes, a flight of 4 P-51 fighter planes approaching the field were contacted by radio and asked to chase the object. Leader of the flight was Captain Thomas F. Mantell, Jr., veteran of the Normandy invasion, with some 3,000 flying hours to his credit. At 2:45, Mantell reported by radio.
Object directly ahead and above and moving about half my speed. Going up to take a look.
At 3:15, Mantell reported again.
Object still ahead and above. Moving at about my speed or faster. 360 miles per hour. The thing looks metallic and is of tremendous size. I'm trying to close in for a better look.
By now, Mantell and his flight were at about 15,000 feet. They had no oxygen equipment. At 18,000 feet, the escorting planes turned back, but Mantell kept climbing. His next report came from 20,000 feet.
Going to 25,000. If no closer, we'll abandon search.
That was the last report from Captain Thomas Mantell. At approximately 25,000 feet, it is believed he blacked out for want of oxygen. His plane climbed another 5,000 feet and then went into a dive. When it crashed, parts of it were scattered around an area covering 1/6 of a mile. Project Saucer's conclusion.
It seems probable that the object observed was the planet Venus.
Later, in a report dated April 27, 1949, this conclusion was reversed. Further investigation showed the elevation and azimuth readings of Venus and the object as reported at specified time intervals just didn't jibe. The object Captain Mantell chased to his tragic death is now officially marked unidentified.
He's going to give us some of his opinions tonight about Major A. Holt. He's going to give us some of his opinions tonight about flying saucers. And he also is going to give us the official statement of Major Donald E. Kehoe. I understand that in this statement, which will be read to us, we will learn, possibly for the first time, what actually happened on the night of the telecast of the Armstrong Circle Theater, January 22nd, over CBS. Later, I've been told Major Aho will also tell us of newspaper and radio reports of sightings of flying saucers being seen overhead by audiences of Dr. George Hunt Williamson as they left the lecture halls in the various cities on the West Coast, during which one reporter not only witnessed it, but also took photos. And we have a lot of other interesting material for you this morning. Major Aho, since that Armstrong Circle Theater telecast, there's been a lot of stories going around about what happened. I don't want to know the facts at the moment, but I was just wondering, do you think when a person claims that they've seen a flying saucer, that they should be put into a mental hospital?
I am, boss. I am.
Well, John, I don't believe they should. If that is the case, why, there'd be thousands of people in the world right today in mental institutions who have had these sightings all over the world.
And it's all up to us.
And if we went so far as putting the people that had these sightings, had these experiences in the hospital, and we'd no doubt have to hospitalize the witnesses also, because there are a number of witnesses in many of these reported sightings. That is something that I would just like to discuss at some length later this evening, and discuss the very interesting case of Reinhold Schmidt in Kearney, Nebraska, and bring to light everything that has happened up until now.
Do you believe the Schmidt story?
Well, let's put it this way, John. I wasn't there. I wasn't a witness, but I believe that the man's story has possibilities. And if his statement can be borne out that there were 3 or 4 other witnesses that saw this same ship, and the fact that these reported landings, these reports came from many parts of the nation. I have with me some news this evening about a similar type of landing story from Long Beach, California. And when you add that to the Loveland, Texas incidents, and White Sands, New Mexico, and Nashville, Tennessee, and the fact that these are all occurring about the same day with no relationship between them. The parties did not know each other, and they occurred almost simultaneously. Then we should begin to consider that perhaps the Reinhold Schmidt story did have some merit.
And just because you've heard a lot of other stories, Major Aho, you feel that there's a possibility that the Schmidt story is true?
Well, John, I have received several letters from Reinhold Schmidt. I am aware that that right today he's back at the scene of operations. Many people know that he was sent to a mental institution in Hastings, Nebraska, which I think we should discuss at some length when you want to go into that part of the program.
He's out now.
He's out, and he claims to have passed every test he demanded, according to his letter, every test they could give him, and he passed these tests.
Yeah, I wanted to add one small addendum there, John.
First, is it a plane? Is it a dream? The American Broadcasting Company presents The Search for the Flying Saucers with Walter Kiernan.
Thanks, Les. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Many have seen them, millions have heard about them. It's the biggest who's it, what's it story of the year, the flying saucers. At the moment, we have a fellow up in a plane hunting a flying saucer, and good hunting to him. Standing by in various parts of the country are people who have seen a flying saucer. Not that they all agree in their description of the thing as a saucer. To different people, it takes different forms. One woman said it looked like a 5-room house. Many people see that when the housing shortage will be over. But explanations vary as much as descriptions. Walter Winchell says he has information that it's a new type flying wing. Andrei Gromyko says that maybe it's a Russian discus thrower who doesn't know his own strength. It has been suggested that a disc jockey on Mars is weeding out his old platters.
Only you can make all this world seem right.
That it's a radar anti-detection advice, that it's natural phenomena, that it's a national psychosis. Half the people in the country are scared to death, and the other half never laughed so many. But whatever it is, it has taken our minds off taxes, toil, and trouble for a little while, and that's not bad. Now suppose we start our trip around the country and hear from some of the people who have reported seeing these strange goings-on in the air. The flying saucers were seen in Upper New York State by Louis Stebbins, solid citizen, treasurer of Warren County, I should say. Let's hear him tell his story from Glen Falls.
Whatever it was, certainly created a lot of interest. And I say whatever it was because, frankly, I am still wondering. It was on Friday night, 27th of June, somewhere between 9:30 and 10 o'clock. Our neighbor, Mrs. Caffrey, my wife, and I were sitting on the porch when we saw this bright, shiny object moving in an arc-like path across the sky. The thing was about the size of an automobile headlight, and it appeared to be giving off a bright red fire from the front and blue from the back. We couldn't exactly say it was a flying disc we have been hearing about on the radio. Rather, we suspected it might have been a large meteor. I took a lot of kidding about the thing until the papers published a story about the American Meteor Society's report that a fireball, a type of meteor, may have landed that night in northern New York or Vermont. And I hope it was a meteor. Then maybe folks will stop phoning at 2 a.m. asking if I have found the cup to go with my flying saucers. That's my story. And now back to Walter Kiernan.
My dream come true, my one.
Another UFO.
All the wayward wind and to the wayward track. My wonder, to the all the wayward wind.
I understand that one of the very short one. Thank you. One of the eminent citizens of that town was a witness to this very thing. But because of the ridicule which was heaped upon it, and the great amount of censure and opprobrium, he considered it much better for the safety of his own skin and the safety of his own reputation to remain incognito. But he told individuals that he had seen it, but refused to let his name be used.
I don't want to know the source of your information, but may I just ask you this? Is this hearsay?
Probably not.
You heard the statement that was made by Major A-hole a moment ago, and I was just wondering, as an astronomer, and also I understand that you were 5 years chairman of the British Interplanetary Society,
I think with that background, you possibly have some about the possibility of saucers interplanetary.
Yes, I think it's only a matter of time before we're visited from space. In fact, I had an article in Harper's Magazine about 3 or 4 months ago called Where's Everybody?, which was on this very theme. There are at least 100,000 million suns in this one universe of ours, and we're probably a pretty backward section of it. And that we've only been civilized, if we are civilized, for a very short period. Thousands of civilizations out there among the stars with very much higher standards than ours, and they have space travel and interstellar travel. So it's certainly only a matter of time before we're visited.
Now, when you say, Mr. Clark, it's only a matter of time, are you implying that possibly they haven't arrived here as yet?
I should think it's very probable they've arrived scores of times in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And it's even possible they've arrived in historic time. I mean, since there's been men who've recorded these things. I mean, some of Charles Fort's accounts are very hard to explain any other way except the arrival of spaceships in the Earth's atmosphere. But I don't think they're arriving now.
You don't think they're arriving now? When you say that, do you mean today?
Well, I mean, I don't think they've arrived.
Or during the last 6 months?
In the last, during the century, say.
The Air Corps in 1948, July 24th, a statement by General George C. Kennedy, who was at that time chief of the Strategic Air Command, after the so-called spaceship sighting by the pilot. That doesn't mean that they're interplanetary. They may be from a foreign government.
Doesn't even mean they're machines.
It says we have, all he said is we have nothing remotely like what was described by the witnesses. Absolutely nothing.
In August, the date was withheld, but a top-secret estimate of the situation by the Air Technical Intelligence Center, later declassified but never released, stated that flying saucers were interplanetary.
Do you realize?
Classified, not really.
Do you realize the reason?
I'm not trying to impress by whether it was classified or declassified.
Oh, I see. Well, what is the impressive part?
Released.
What is the impressive part of this statement? We've been leading up with my end man bit here for 5 minutes to this statement. Now, what is the impressive part of it?
Well, I don't speak good English. It said the flying saucers were interplanetary spaceships.
And this, as far as I know, this was made by a demented corporal at Dayton, Ohio. Now, how do you know any different?
No, it was made by a rather higher level than that. It was made by a number of quite competent authorities who had access to the information and who came to this conclusion, as I think many reasonable men would do, if their knowledge of atmospheric optics and natural phenomena was not complete.
Then you're kind of go along with Dr. Menzel of Harvard.
Oh, no, I don't go along entirely with him, but most of the confusion in this subject is caused by mixing up two entirely separate things. One, UFOs. I think UFOs probably exist. And the other, so-called flying saucers, which are all vehicles, definite vehicles, which are a totally different thing, and which don't exist.
Flying saucers are different from UFOs. And according to your opinion, Mr. Clark, flying saucers do not exist, but there's a great possibility that UFOs do.
I would say that there's a 99% possibility that UFOs do exist, and only a 1% possibility that flying saucers as interplanetary vehicles exist.
Well, Mr. Clark, I wonder if you could tell me what a UFO is.
Well, let me go back to, I'll be very glad to, let me go back to this report of these gentlemen who decided...
The one that Cortland is talking about?
Decided, in view of the fact, these reports and this evidence, that these things were really interplanetary vehicles. This is a conclusion I came to myself about that time as a result of these reports. And it wasn't until I'd seen about 6 UFOs myself that I realized they were not spaceships. The point is that there are far more fantastic things in the sky that anybody realizes, even a trained observer who spends a lot of time looking at the sky. And I don't see how anyone hearing all these reports and not seeing them could really fail to think they were spaceships. But they're not spaceships when you do analyze the evidence. Now, let me give my reasons for thinking this. First of all, I say I heard all these reports, these sightings, made by competent people, and I mean, you could say they're all lying. And they were very convincing and very extraordinary and very inexplicable. And then, as I traveled around the world, I've been around the world a couple of times in the last 5 years, I saw quite a few strange things. And I have now seen, I've just been listing them, I have seen 6 UFOs. By that I mean objects which could easily have been interpreted as spaceships, which took a lot of explaining, and often the explanations were so fantastic I almost hesitate to give them. But in every case I was able to find out what they were. But I am sure that 99% of the people who'd seen them would have decided they were spaceships, but they were not.
But on November 3rd, I presume you're aware, Mr. Clark, that there were quite a concentration of sightings. They started actually on November 2nd. On November 2nd, the owner of station KCLV in New Mexico saw a strange glowing object speeding southeast. Now, he could have been mistaken, no question. But the Ground Observer Corps at Midland, Texas, logged reports of a large bluish object flying west at a low altitude. And that same evening, Civilian Aeronautics Association, is that correct, Wayne? You're up on that, CAA? Tower operators on duty at the Amarillo Airport Base sighted a peculiar bluish object moving through the sky. And one of the tower operators, whose business it is to know these things, said he had never seen anything so spectacular. Now, however, we get to the things that are going to be more concrete and where we can really sink some teeth in. At 1:30 on November 3rd, on a Sunday, a huge oval-shaped object was reported as landing, or very closely approaching trucks, on a highway in Levelland, Texas, or right outside of Levelland, Texas. Now, the sheriff investigated these cases, and in 3 of them, the close passage of the UFO had stopped the car engines and dimmed or put out the headlights. Now, 2 other men, Clem himself, the sheriff, and his deputy sheriff, saw the glow from the object themselves as it crossed above the highway and brilliantly lighted up the pavement. And this light was seen by 2 other patrolmen, each following in a separate car. Now, would you care to comment on that before I go into some others? Yes. They saw the object as 125 to 200 feet in diameter, I might add.
Well, now, this boils down to a number of separate categories. First of all, the sightings, objects seen in the sky, those are quite different from what I was talking about in flying saucers and vehicles. They're what I call the UFOs, and many of those may be an unexplained UFO. I'd like to come back to that later. But before, let me recapitulate. Anything strange seen in the sky, not close enough to get you to give an idea of its structure, that may have many hundreds of separate explanations, and I think there may be a residue which has no explanation yet. You can call this a genuine UFO, which may turn out to be quite a new phenomenon. I have some ideas on that I'd like to come to later. But now, as for the reports of things that land and come down to Earth, people see things coming out of them, I just do not believe any of those. And this one you have just quoted, contains the seeds of its own disproof. The story of the car engine stopping, because this brings me right back to 1937. In 1937, 1938, car engines were stopping all over England. They were stopping near the big towers that were being put up along the east coast, because those towers were supposed to contain a ray, to generate a ray, which would stop the engines of the Luftwaffe when they bombed England. And this report, every week you were hearing about car engines being stopped. Everybody believed this, quite genuinely, that car engines were being stopped. This was absolute nonsense. They were radar stations, and the car engine reports were being put out by counterintelligence to make people think that this is what these stations really were, that they were to stop the Luftwaffe's engines. There was no truth whatsoever in these reports, but this was a universal belief. So whenever I hear about car engines stopping, I remember the same thing 20 years ago, and there was not a word of truth in it.
Well, do you feel then that it's possible that our government are putting out these false rumors?
There's no need to make false rumors, but no need to put them out.
Well, these had nothing to do with radar towers, Mr. Clark.
No, but this is a beautiful example of the sort of hysteria that generates. Someone starts the story, and quite possibly someone sees something and they stole their engine. And then that starts the whole thing.
And then they put out the headlights, too.
Sure. They probably pulled the ignition out.
This is KPFA in Berkeley, Over the Edge, tonight bringing you another UFO, the 50s UFO program.